Welcome into the 49er Access podcast, and today we are reacting to the news of the San Francisco 49ers promoting, I shall say, Daniel Sorensen to the defensive coordinator position and adding Brandon Staley to the coaching staff. Now, I know this news, at least to me, wasn't that much of a shock. I always said Brandon Staley felt like the man for the job, but surprisingly, a lot of fans are angry about this. How dare they go and sign and hire Brandon Staley to be an assistant head coach? And Daniel Sorensen, that's not Bill Belichick. That's not Mike Vrabel. I'm angry. The reality of the situation is the San Francisco 49ers made the safe and easy decision. Now, is that the one they initially wanted to make? We'll dive into exactly how the last 16 days have gone for San Francisco. But more importantly, we have to know who Nick Sorensen is. If you're going to come in and be this team's new defensive coordinator, we need to know who Nick Sorensen is. So you have Robert Saleh, he goes to the Jets. You have DeMeco Ryans, he goes to the Texans. You tried this one-year experimental plan with Steve Wilks, a defensive backs coach that really is outside of the scheme you want to run. It works kind of doesn't work, but there were some tumultuous spots throughout his tenure in San Francisco. You lose against Kansas City and you feel the need to fire him. Okay, you fire Steve Wilks. You put yourself in a position that you do not have the pick of the litter. You don't get to find the best assistants here and there to fill your vacant positions. You have a handful of guys that you may like, may not like, and a handful of people that you may have liked previously, but they're now somewhere else. You don't have much to choose from. Many of the options, the rumors were it's going to be an in-house hire. That's exactly what happened. Nick Sorensen is the San Francisco 49ers' new defensive coordinator. So who exactly is Nick Sorensen? He has 21 years of coaching experience. He has coached in the NFL, in college, even played college football almost as long as I've been alive. If you want to say someone is qualified for a job, it is indeed Nick Sorensen. But within that, I think despite him not having any previous defensive coordinator experience, because that's the kicker here, right? He's never been a DC prior to now. You're going to have questions of, is he built for this? Is he going to be a good defensive coordinator? The reality of it is, we have no idea. We have no idea if Nick Sorensen's going to pan out. We have no idea if this pick, the in-house hire, is the right man for the job, but he may have been one of the only men for the job they felt ready enough. And knowing San Francisco, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, when they let go of Steve Wilks, what did they preach? What did they tell us? They want to get back to who they were under Ryans, under Saleh, get as close as they can back to who their identity on defense has been pre-Steve Wilks. Well, Sorensen isn't exactly that, but I think he's as close as you are going to get, maybe outside of trying to poach Jeff Ulbrich away from the Jets, which we all knew was not going to happen. They were not going to let Jeff Ulbrich go, especially to the Niners in the exact same position. So again, who is Nick Sorensen? 21 years of coaching experience, and here's the thing. He has relationships with these players. He has relationships with these linebackers. San Francisco wants to marry the linebacking core and the defensive line, marry that front seven together. That's how they want their defense, or who they want their defense to run through unit-wise. They do not want their defense to be secondary oriented. They want a good secondary, but they want their front seven to be who controls the game, who the game is run and played through. Nick Sorensen already has that built-in relationship with Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, and he replaced Johnny Holland for a small bit of time in San Francisco. I believe, 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago now. Like, he was in that room with Johnny Holland, with Fred Warner. He's a guy you point to and say, our players, our star players, how we want to play, are already comfortable with him in the locker room, watching film, going over tape. He's a guy who already has a built-in relationship that they can go to, they can talk to, they'll listen. He'll be on that sideline, not in the booth. He's someone who you're not going to have to question, do my guys, my stars, relate to? That's the thing with Steve Wilks. Respected for sure. Did he have the credentials for the job? Yes. I don't know if the team completely bought in, especially during that weird stretch in the middle of the season. Vikings game, Bengals game, Browns game. There seemed to be times that Nick Bosa, Armstead, Hargrave, maybe even Fred Warner, guys who had been here during Saleh and Ryan's, weren't exactly completely bought into what Wilks was preaching. You can go back and find there are pictures of them at halftime in the locker room, and those guys look checked out when Wilks is trying to talk to them. Now, a picture could be nothing, but it did feel like that Nick Bosa was a little unhappy. There were comments made of like, this is different to us. We're out of our comfort zone. How do we get back to being a San Francisco 49ers defense likened to the Saleh and Ryan's schemes and tenures here in San Francisco? He also played linebacker at Virginia Tech. So not only can he relate to the guys, he was one of the guys in college. Like, he is and has the experience of playing linebacker. He's also, I don't want to say a Swiss Army knife, but he kind of is a jack of all trades. In San Francisco, he was a defensive assistant / pass game coordinator / nickelback coach. So right there in itself, he already has 3 different jobs. But previously with San Francisco, he also ran these team meetings where they called them the ball, where he emphasized getting takeaways and turnovers, how to get the ball back for your offense, how to win the turnover battle. Someone who's aggressive defensively, that is like, hey guys, like, we have the personnel, the roster, the scheme, the talent to lead the NFL in interceptions like they did this season. We have the ability to win games by ourselves defensively, which prior to this past season, they did a ton. More recently, I think of the Saints game in 2022 or 2022, Jimmy G's last year in San Francisco. It's like a 1-score game. Only touchdown is a kind of Hail Mary ball in the back of the end zone to Jawan Jennings. Talanoa Hufanga, massive goal line force fumble on Alvin Kamara in the red zone. Insane defensive stuff pre-Steve Wilks. The defense last year didn't feel like they could actually win San Francisco games by themselves, but even when they weren't winning games, they were still getting takeaways, giving the offense, the stronger unit of the two, a chance to actually power them to victory. Nick Sorensen's a guy who's emphasized, hey, the more we get the ball back for a Kyle Shanahan-led scheme and offense, put the ball in the hands of Christian McCaffrey, the Offensive Player of the Year, Debo, Brandon Ayuk, Kittle, and our MVP caliber quarterback and Brock Purdy, we are going to be more successful. And the more times you get takeaways, the less time you have to be on the field. That is all what you need to know about Nick Sorensen in San Francisco. But previously in Jacksonville, he was a special teams coach where he led one of the units to have, of 8 teams, his unit was one that had a kick return for a touchdown. He was one of the biggest reasons as to why Jamal Agnew, who's a stud in Jacksonville, as a returner, won Special Teams Player of the Month. And you go back before Jacksonville, you go to his time in Seattle. I mean, he went to 2 Super Bowls. He won 1. He was a special teams defensive back and nickelback coach with the Seahawks. He was an assistant on special teams and coached their DBs and nickelbacks. He was there when Shaq Griffin, of all people, who fell off the map after leaving Seattle, went to the Pro Bowl. He's a guy who has a knack for, having the ability to coach special teams, nickelbacks, defensive backs. He likely will have ties to that front seven being a linebackers coach. And if you are San Francisco, and we can kind of get into this now, I don't know if Nick Sorensen was their first option. In fact, I don't think he was. It felt more like Kyle Shanahan just wanted to rid himself of Steve Wilks. Fire Wilks, cut Isaiah Oliver, and just move on, clean the slate, start this thing over. He wanted no pushback, nothing in his way that would make him go to bed at night saying it was that guy's fault. If you think he's a scapegoat, that's up to you. But I do think for Kyle Shanahan, Nick Sorensen happens to be the safest option that was on his list. In-house, former linebacker, coached with Pete Carroll, under Pete Carroll in Seattle. They can get back to running that attacking forefront they wanted to use, mostly using zone coverage on the back end, a lot less man coverage than this past year. They can allow their defense to look like it was under Ryans, under Saleh, albeit a different variant of that similar scheme. They can get back to their identity, who they at least want to try to be. Randy Elite Daytona in the chat, as always. He likes the moves. Tell me if you like the moves in the chat below, in the comments. Let me know what you think of Nick Sorensen being named the Niners defensive coordinator, and Brandon Staley, who we'll get to in a second. Randy also points out Sorensen, a special teams guy as well. Yes, Randy, in Jacksonville with Seattle. This guy has done nearly everything outside of coach offense in the NFL. He has the experience. But again, I do not think this was their first choice. It was, let's just pick anybody else besides Steve Wilks. I think that was the idea. It was, okay, we have a glaring issue here. Shanahan and Wilks don't see eye to eye. Let's move off of him and we can find a replacement. It did feel like that Shanahan didn't know who he was going to hire. Like, this felt eerily similar to the trading up for Trey Lance. Number 3 overall pick. You're at 12. You want to get a franchise quarterback. Okay, cool. Do you know exactly who you want? No, I just want to have the option to find somebody else. And sometimes that works out for you. Like, this Nick Sorensen could be great, could be awesome. But we've seen similar things, especially with this regime, happen before. Go from 12 to number 3. Mac Jones is there. He's the fallback option. And then there's Justin Fields. Then there's Trey Lance. They picked Trey Lance, which I wish that worked out. I really wish it did. But it didn't. This feels similar. Let's get rid of Jimmy because we're done with Jimmy Garoppolo. We got to find our guy, find somebody else that works for us. Let's get rid of Steve Wilks and find somebody else that works for us. Now, sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. When it comes to quarterbacks, you got saved because Brock Purdy's there. But in this case, I do not think Nick Sorensen was exactly the guy. Now, Ezra Pound always, or this is a very common theme here. Kyle Shanahan can't keep a lead in the second half of any Super Bowl. Ezra Pound, that's a glaring problem, like you say. Yes, I feel like Ezra's one of the people that thinks Steve Wilks was a scapegoat. Do I think Steve Wilks' defense in the Super Bowl was a problem? No, I don't. Were there some plays you point to, scenarios you point to and say, what are you doing? The minute Kyle Shanahan had to call a timeout for not liking the play calling, it was over. It was over. And you can argue it was over before that game anyways. Even if they won, there's a real chance Steve Wilks still gets fired. But Ezra, to your point, yes, there's a much glaring issue or a higher, more clear-cut issue than just defense. But for San Francisco, when you have a defense that underperformed, especially in the running game, like San Francisco's did this past season, you may see that as a much higher glaring issue to fix, right? A much more important issue to make a change with. There is no excuse as to why a front seven with Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, insert secondary defensive end Chase Young, Clellan Ferrell, Randy Gregory, Dre Jackson. There's no excuse as to why that front four couldn't stop the run. No excuse as to why that front four paired with Fred Warner and Greg Greenlaw ranked 26th against the run this season. In fact, there's a reason you bring in Javon Hargrave to improve your run defense and to get you double-digit sacks. The sacks were kind of there, which they couldn't finish during their 3-game losing streak to get sacks. Kirk Cousins was running out of defensive ends' arms. Burrow, the same thing. Philip Walker, the same thing. Guys were not finishing. And they also were not stopping the run against the Packers, against the Lions early, against Kansas City. While they helped Pacheco, there were some plays in that game. It didn't go their way. But again, when you see this all-pro stacked defense, you put more money into this past offseason, and you acquired 2 edge rushers to aid, still couldn't stop the run for the majority of the season. That's, I believe, what the main issue was, which is why you're bringing Nick Sorensen, who, former linebacker, knows your scheme, Pete Carroll guy, fits the Niner ways, how I'll call it. Fits what they want to do more than Steve Wilks did. Steve Wilks was an outsider, defensive backs coach. Nick Sorensen in the room, knows the guys. When you see him, you go, hey, Nick. When you saw Steve, it was like, nice to meet you, Steve. It wasn't the same thing. The vibe was off. Something was wrong, right? Now, you can go a long ways with things being wrong, hence this past season for San Francisco. But you bring in Nick Sorensen, who, let's be honest here, he could stink. He could suck. But just like trading up for Trey Lance, just like Jimmy Garoppolo, just like Nick Bosa and plenty of other moves they've made, trading for and trading away DeForest Buckner, if this doesn't work, they have a fallback option. Oh, they trade for Trey Lance. Well, Jimmy G's still here, folks. They have a fallback option in case Trey Lance doesn't work. Oh, well, the next season, Trey Lance is the guy. Well, Jimmy G's on that side field, just in case it doesn't work out. And if you're San Francisco, that is exactly why they also hired Brandon Staley. That is the exact reason as to why they hired Brandon Staley as their assumed assistant defensive or their assistant head coach, who will likely take on a Vic Fangio style kind of roaming assistant coach, right? Shanahan, to me, got the best of both worlds for what he was looking for. He wanted a guy that knew the system, could run the front four with zone coverage in the back, like Pete Carroll, like Saddle, like DeMeco Ryans, like Robert Saleh, but bringing in Brandon Staley also gets in the kind of scheme, assistant, guy that knows the Vic Fangio style, runs the Vic Fangio style equal or at least close to enough of what Vic Fangio likes to do. Now, there's a reason why he was not named defensive coordinator. I would assume, knowing his history with the Chargers, that San Francisco just, let's make Nick Sorensen the guy. And then we'll have Brandon behind him making tweaks, making changes, offering his expert opinion on things while he's in the booth, right? Kind of being the eyes up above, if you might, to Nick Sorensen's on the field. Like, I have no doubt in my mind, on the sideline, on game days, there's Nick Sorensen in the booth with the glasses on and the chart and the binoculars and the headset. You know what's going to be? Brandon Staley. He's a guy who never has to answer any questions, is not going to be in press conferences, not going to be questioned, not going to have to talk to anybody. He's simply going to be an assistant and aid them when needed. He might run a meeting here or so. He might take over the defensive pass game coordinator job. What he's not going to do is be your DC at the forefront of criticism. He's just going to be like a hawk roaming over the practice field and on game days, seeing how can he make tweaks to make things better. Where can they make adjustments? Be the Vic Fangio to this team. like Fangio was to the Dolphins last year. Like Shanahan has been trying to get Vic Fangio here since 2017. This is exactly what he wanted. Now, I think he actually wanted Vic Fangio. Like, had San Francisco lost in the first round of the playoffs and just got killed by Green Bay, which almost happened. They almost lost that game. Had that occurred, I have no doubt in my mind Vic Fangio would have been the favorite for this job. But since they didn't, what does Shanahan do? Nick Sorensen, guy who knows the scheme, but also behind him, in case Nick Sorensen stinks, in case everything falls apart, hey, Brandon Staley, Nick, go back to being the linebackers coach. Go back to being the defensive pass game coordinator. Go back to being an assistant. Hey, Brandon, come down from the booth and now be my defensive coordinator, a la Sean McVay and Brandon Staley in 2020. I think this move benefits Shanahan more than any other move he would have made. You want to bring in Bill Belichick, and you are going like Bill will get 9 times more questions than Kyle will. There'll be media everywhere because they want to talk to Bill. It'll be like Bill, not the science guy. Bill. And Kyle's like, how about Kyle? Like, Kyle was never going to hire. Take that back. I don't think Kyle would have liked to deal with Bill Belichick's media attention, media presence, right? But you bring in Nick Sorensen, quiet guy, first-year defensive coordinator, leader of men, knows the roster, comfortable within the scheme. Brandon Staley, Fangio-style, previous head coach, defensive coordinator, doesn't have to answer questions, is not going to be in the media, is just going to be quiet like a mouse and do his job, lead a handful of meetings elsewhere. I think this could blow up in Shanahan's face, but the reality of it is, this to me feels like the best case going forward for Kyle. You fire Wilkes, the scapegoat. He's a scapegoat. It's Kyle's fault. Ezra Pound here says it was a glaring problem. Kyle Shanahan's offense can't keep a lead in the second half of Super Bowls. You're right, Ezra. You're right. What does Shanahan do? Fire Steve Wilkes. He's a scapegoat. Get him out of here. Then what does he do? Hires a guy in the building, a goody two-shoes, Nick Sorensen, special teams guy, coached under Pete Carroll, is at Jacksonville, special teams coach, been in this system for a couple years now, knows the guys in and out, has relationships with the players. They'll respect him. They'll answer him on the sideline. He's a hoorah kind of guy. Meanwhile, the Fangio-style scheme coordinator he wants up there in the booth with the eyes in the sky. Like, this is like... People don't like the idea of Brandon Staley because he failed in Los Angeles with the Chargers and because those 63 points to the Raiders. I think it's almost 70. People point to all of that. Separate Staley as a head coach and Staley as a defensive coordinator. They're different people. We talked about as this process was occurring and transpiring that hey, like, you may not like it, that Brandon Staley feels like he's going to be the guy. Now, he was kind of a guy. He's in the room now, right? But he isn't the guy. But he's certainly there to help the guy. He has the experience of being the guy as a defensive coordinator, but he's not going to be the guy here for now, right? Brandon Staley was brought in to say, hey, Brandon, you ain't got to draft people. You ain't got to scout people. You just need to help Nick Sorensen along the way, call plays, adjust the scheme, put guys in positions to succeed. Forget head coaching. You don't have to be a leader of men. All you have to do is be an assistant. No one's going to go to you for answers. No one's going to question your authority. No one's going to hound you in the media. Well, why'd you do this? Clock management, that. 70 points for the Raiders. Seriously? That's never going to be on Brandon Staley's plate. It's simply going to be Nick Sorensen here. It'll be Chris Kosaric. You're the defensive lines coach. Coach your guys. Nick Sorensen, Johnny Holland. How do we marry this front seven together really well? Oh, then Brandon Staley. How do we tie in the secondary? Like, Brandon Staley is not going near Nick Bosa. Like, there ain't no way in heck Nick Bosa is listening to Brandon Staley, right? I do think for Nick Sorensen, bringing back that scheme, hopefully it works, will get this team more sacks, more pressure on the quarterback. Like, that's the expectation, right? That's why you revert back to who they once were in a more successful scheme. Get Nick Bosa back to playing Defensive Player of the Year style. Get Javon Hargrave back to having 10 sacks a year. You get your defense back to being who they've once been, you're likely to see more takeaways, more turnovers, especially knowing now, which I do think was a beneficial thing under Steve Wilks, the emergence of Lenore, the emergence pre-injury of Hufanga, Jair Brown, Mooney Ward, to a lesser extent, Ambry Thomas. Like, it's not like the secondary didn't get better under Steve Wilks. They did. The play calling, not so much. The weird blitzing didn't fit. But if you can almost marry secondary play of Steve Wilks back into the Pete Carroll, now Nick Sorensen style front four with zone coverage they want to run in San Francisco, you kind of got something cooking here that might be better than what it was in previous years if all goes to plan. Now back to Brandon Staley, right? Brandon Staley is not going to Nick Bosa saying, hey, Nick, try this. Hey, Nick, I want you to do this. Nick's like, you can stay the hell away from me. You and my brother did not get along. He didn't like your scheme. I've heard a lot about you, Brandon. Just please don't come near me. Don't come near me at all. Which I do think does impact how, like, it's going to be interesting as to what practices look like, what your game days look like. Like, if you've been to an OTAs, a mini camp, right? You've seen what the practices look like. There's assistants everywhere, like Chris Kosaric and Daryl Tapp, who's now in Washington, usually have the backfield to the left with the defensive line. This past year, it was the backfield, usually to the right, which was defensive backs, where Steve Wilks usually coached the guys. Then you had in the middle, Johnny Holland of that field, coaching Fred and Dre Greenlaw and D. Winters and the linebackers. Closest to you once you enter the field, the closest field is usually the offense. That's where Kyle usually is around there. You have Brian Greasy with Purdy and those guys. You have other people there as well. But it'll be interesting to see where does Brandon Staley, like, where's Brandon Staley's spot on the practice field. If he's going to be an assistant head coach, is he around Kyle Shanahan? I would assume no. I'm going to go on a limb here and say we're going to have Kosaric in his corner, Johnny Holland, Nick Sorensen in their corner. Then we're going to see Daniel Bullocks and Brandon Staley in their corner. And I don't think those two guys are going to mix. They'll of course come together in meetings and whatnot, but it just feels like Brandon, like what it feels like could happen, because I think Brandon Staley kind of has the ick to him, unfortunately. I like him, but there's a reason why he wasn't hired as defensive coordinator. There's a reason why he is an assistant to the defensive coordinator, essentially, right? He is a white shrew to Nick Sorensen and Michael Scott, if you will. I do wonder that they can kind of keep Brandon separate from Nick, separate from the defensive line. That's beneficial to what they want to do in San Francisco. You want to, like, San Francisco's scheme under Ryans and Saleh was much more of a, hey, we ain't pulling stunts, none of that garbage. We're just going to the quarterback, read and react. And I think for what they have with Nick Bosa, now Javon Hargrave, and Eric Armstead, you have three guys that can do that extremely well. Nick did that at Ohio State in his first few years in San Francisco and won a freaking Defensive Player of the Year. Like, is probably what the number one, number two edge rusher, maybe number three, Watt, Garrett, then Bosa. He's certainly in that conversation, right? It does feel like they want to get back to more of that read and react. And when you do that, you will let your defense play a little more freely. Then you're on the back end, you play zone coverage, and that's where Staley and Bullocks and Johnny Holland, Warner, and Greenlaw come into play, right? But with Brandon Staley, I do think the impact goes much further than just on the field. Like, people on Twitter and X, what if they get Joey Bosa? What if the Chargers release Joey Bosa, Could they bring the Bosa Bros to San Francisco? That's not happening now. Unless there are strict rules. Brandon, do not go near Joey. Do not go near Nick. Like, Joey Bosa probably already wasn't coming to San Francisco. This feels like a nail in the hammer, or a hammer to the nail in the coffin for that at all. Like, this to me impacts what, just one player, mind you, what they can do in free agency. But I think he'll be in the booth nowhere near the defensive line. Like, this is going to be let your dogs eat, and then you let your secondary be the ball hawks. Let them kind of, be the falcon looking for the field mice, right? Looking for the ball. And you have Nick Sorensen, who preaches takeaways. Like, he is someone that, wanted players to be like Charles Tillman, right? Peanut Punch Tillman when he was in Carolina and Chicago. He wanted players to be efficient at how to get takeaways and turnovers. I do think we are going, if all turns out well, that San Francisco is going to be similar how they were this year, tops in the NFL in interceptions, forced fumbles. Like, this team is going to make it a point to say, hey, we get takeaways and turnovers, our offense can score more points. The more chances they get, the more times they're going to win games. And look, there were just too many times this past year, whether it was players not executing or the scheme itself under Wilkes, teams would march down the field against our defense that was stacked personnel-wise, whether it was the Cardinals at times earlier this year, late in the season, mind you, teams like the Browns, teams like the Bengals, the Vikings, or even the Packers, who have a good young offense, mind you, but also teams like the Lions, and then even at Kansas City, who didn't have a high-powered offense, but has a quarterback that's insane, but teams that likely shouldn't have run down the field against you, and they did. I do think we are going to see a swing back into who San Francisco used to be under Nick Sorensen, but I also think that there is a fail-safe in place. Like, let's say San Francisco tries to get back to who they were under Ryans and Saleh. Get back to that Pete Carroll front four, straight rushers, read and react, zone coverage in a secondary kind of scheme. Get back to who they once were, right? Let's say that fails. Let's say Nick Sorensen stinks. And it's not working out. What do? Oh, who's in the booth? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it underdog? No, it's Brandon freaking Staley. Like, he'll have enough time to know the system, learn the system. Kyle can get comfortable with Brandon Staley. They already have a mutual respect. Staley has coached against this offense a handful of times. He's actually performed pretty well against it in those few times he's coached against it. He also has coached relatively well against the Chiefs. Not perfect. Record isn't there, but he's beat Mahomes twice. They've lost 3 times by 1 score, similar to Kyle Shanahan. Now, I'm not saying that's why they brought Brandon in, but Brandon Staley has more experience coaching against Kansas City because he played them 2 times a year the past, 4 seasons now, right? I do think that he is the fail-safe. He is the, Sorensen's in over his head. Yikes. Bobo, as always in the chat, thank you for watching and listening, Bobo, does say, Khalil Mack will be a former Charger coming to San Francisco. Now, I don't know Khalil Mack's contract situation. None of that. I have no idea. Haven't even looked into him. But Bobo, let's just take that for a generic name. An elite, good edge rusher is going to come in here opposite Nick Bosa. That's exactly what I said in the past podcast, the last show. That my bold prediction was they're going to sign an elite edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa. In fact, they're probably going to sign 2 or 3 guys. Simply, vet guys. Clelin Ferrell should come back. Drake Jackson's not been very good, but you hope post-meniscus recovery, knee injury recovery, he's better, or at least healthier this year. But I think they're going to bring in somebody to aid opposite Nick Bosa. And if you're going to run these vaunted four-man fronts and get back to the Pete Carroll scheme, you have to have the guy opposite Nick Bosa. I don't think that's Chase Young. Maybe Chase Young performs better in a Pete Carroll front forward zone as San Francisco ran the past couple years pre-Steve Wilkes. Maybe that's the case. I also think we are going to see, like, Ezra Pound, again, thank you, Ezra, for watching and listening on Twitter and X. Why sign edge rushers? Referees do not call holding in the Super Bowl. Here's the thing. It's not just about, well, you're right. I do wish refs would call holding. I do wish refs would be consistent. We all know that refs usually don't, or they'll swallow the whistle in a flag in big games, right? Like, you expect to see a handful of holding calls. But in the Super Bowl, you're probably not going to see as many of them. It's not just about, well, they're not going to call holding. Why sign the premier guy across from Bosa? Because it's not just about getting holding calls called. It's about, hey, how can we rush the quarterback? You can manipulate that pocket even if you're being held. You can get the quarterback off his spot even if you're being held. It's about moving the quarterback out of the pocket, which most of them nowadays are better out of the pocket, but there are still plenty that are, when pressured, way worse. Take Jared Goff, for example. I know it wasn't the Super Bowl, but that first half, getting no pressure, not getting sacks, not moving Goff off his spot. He was excellent in that first half against San Francisco. As soon as that defense started getting home, Hargrave, Bosa, Armstead, Chase Young, name somebody else in that group. As soon as they started getting home and moving Goff out of the pocket, what happened? Goff fell apart. Yes, some luck was involved, sure. But Jared Goff became exactly who we thought he was going to be, Dennis Green style. He was who we thought he was once you get him out of the pocket and uncomfortable. He can't throw on the run. He misses some throws. Guys drop some passes. Bing, bang, boom, you're back in the game. It's not just about getting an edge rusher to make sure they call holding. It's about getting an edge rusher to apply pressure to quarterbacks, get them off their spot, even when you are being held. Now, how often does that happen? I don't know. But it's about when you have four guys able to get to the quarterback, you are going to usually win that play often, more times than not. Now, you have guys like Mahomes that are just different. Josh Allen, just different kind of guys. And that's why you sit back and you say, man, I wish we had that guy, right? But most quarterbacks out of the pocket, pressured, not the same. That's why you sign the edge rusher. Well, and in fact, just say he wasn't any elite guy. Say it isn't Chase Young or Brian Burns, Daniil Hunter. Name Khalil Mack, like Bobo says. Just add in Clelin Ferrell, Kerry Hyder Jr. in previous years. Add in other Arden Key. Add in other guys that have been here. Charles Omenihu, who's really good this year for Kansas City pre-injury. Add those guys in that conversation. They're not great players. They're not elite players. San Francisco, I believe, has three edge rushers currently under contract. Nick Bosa, Robert Beal Jr., who had, one maybe sack this year against the Cardinals, I think, if that's correct. Maybe against the Rams. He had one play, maybe, that was like, okay, this guy's got something, but a rookie. And Drake Jackson post-injury. This team needs edge rushers. And they need guys that can play now, not, and we'll see you in 2 years. You got to have somebody opposite Nick Bosa, especially that if you want to get back to this read and react defense, to this 4-3 style defense like Pete Carroll, like Salah, like Ryans, now like Nick Sorensen. You want to get back to that style of defense, you got to have the guy opposite Nick Bosa. They've tried so many times. D Ford, great for a year. Injuries came in. He's gone. Chase Young, effort wasn't always there. Was great in the Super Bowl, but probably going to be gone. Randy Gregory was good in the Super Bowl and then wasn't great before that, really. Now he's gone. Clelin Ferrell got hurt, and now he's gone. They can bring those guys back, sure, but you have to have somebody opposite Nick Bosa, especially if you want to run a non-Wilks, more Pete Carroll stylized, previous to Wilks style defense ran in San Francisco. You are essentially, if you don't find that guy, you are giving the opposing offense a chance to say, well, I got 5 against 3. If you don't have a guy that can win one-on-one, you are giving the offense, which they already have over defenses now in this day and age, you're giving them the advantage. You have to find the guy opposite Nick Bosa, even more so now that you're reverting back to the scheme you're running under Saleh and under Ryans. But I do think that while they did sign Nick Sorensen, we'll see what happens when how everything transpires in the offseason. There's a comfortability level there with him already in the room. I'm fine with the hire. I think Brandon Staley makes sense to bring in. I think, and I said the entire time, I think he was going to be the guy. Now, he is not the defensive coordinator, but I do think it makes sense to bring him in as a fail-safe option, a fallback option, but also someone who's done this before and can help Nick Sorensen as he progresses into his first full off season as a defensive coordinator. But we can focus on that, and we'll talk about this the entire year. The entire year, how Nick Sorensen and how Brandon Staley are doing. But that was not the only news that transpired. This morning, after, it was like at 4:30 in the morning that Schefter and Jeremy Fowler tweeted this out. Breaking news, San Francisco promotes Nick Sorensen and hires Brandon Staley as their assistant head coach. Cool, it's 4:30 a.m. Great. Mike Silver tweets out later in the day that there was a 16-day period in between firing Wilks and hiring Staley and promoting Sorensen to DC. What he said, and Ezra Pound hints at it here. I agree with your analysis, which, thank you, Ezra, but I don't think that was the plan A. I think plan A was Spagnuolo or Belichick. And Ezra, to what you're alluding to here, Mike Silver talked about this morning. Now, he said Kyle had 16 days to search for a new defensive coordinator to figure out what he wanted to do. Now, I'm going to assume these are in order here. And I already kind of hinted at this earlier that I don't think Nick Sorensen was their first choice. This, to me, felt like the safe option of, we tried for this guy and that guy and this other guy, and, well, we didn't land him, but we're comfortable with this. Hence, trading up for number 3 to get Trey Lance. Well, we try to get Fields, and if Fields and Lance don't work out, we don't like those guys, we always have the fail-safe of Mac Jones. It's very similar. This is their Mac Jones in this case. Now, it doesn't mean it's not going to work out. Like, this could work out great for them. But, according to Mike Silver, in a summarized tweet, the first step of what Kyle Shanahan did was call Bill Belichick. And who knows what those conversations were like, and even though I don't think that was going to work out, I don't think Shanahan and Bill Belichick were going to be a marriage that were like, oh my goodness, wedding bells. I don't think that was going to be the case, but there was at least a courtesy call. And their relationship goes back a long way. Mike Shanahan, Bill Belichick, a lot of respect there. Don't forget, Belichick called Lynch and Shanahan and said, hey, Kraft and Brady are making me trade Garoppolo. I like him a lot. Do you want him? That's how much respect Belichick has for Kyle. Okay? Now, we know what happened there, but there's so much respect between those two. Kyle called Belichick up and said, hey, I would assume, do you have interest in being my defensive coordinator? I would like to think Belichick said no, or at least, knowing Bill, one of two things occurred. He either said no, or yes, only if I get to bring in my staff. And I would like to assume that was probably the straw that broke the camel's back and ended that conversation. Hey, Bill, sorry, can't do it. That's an assumption, but knowing Bill Belichick wanted to do the exact same thing with the Falcons, and that's why he didn't get that job, I would assume Bill, who is a creature of habit, coach for 25 plus years, been a head coach for forever, one of the greatest coaches of all time, is not going to come to a place and be the outsider. He's just not going to do that. So Bill said no. Oh, we missed on Bill. We didn't get him. We didn't get Matthew Stafford. Oh, darn, right? Go to the next quarterback. Go to our Aaron Rodgers. Okay, who's your Aaron Rodgers? In this case, it's Steve Spagnuolo. Per The Athletic, via Diana Rossini, San Francisco flirted with and tried to hire Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo this offseason to be their defensive coordinator. Now, Spags re-up with Kansas City. When you get beat by the guy twice, if you can't beat him, poach him, right? Poach him over to your side. That's what San Francisco tried to do. They said, man, if we're going to let go of someone that was good, Steve Wilks was fine, right? Everyone loves a ham and cheese sandwich. Everyone is okay with Jimmy G or a game manager being your quarterback. You can win a lot with that guy. A lot. You can be successful with them. Jimmy G got far. Steve Wilks got him far. The exact same place Jimmy G got him. In fact, Steve Wilks, I think his defense played good enough to win that game. I do not put losing against Kansas City on Steve Wilks. If your offense doesn't go stagnant for 3 drives and you score 1 touchdown extra, you probably win that game. But, okay, the ham and cheese wasn't doing it. They wanted something else. Tried for Bill. Didn't get him. Tried for Spags. He said, no, I'm going back to Kansas City because that's where I know I'm likely going to win more championships. If I'm not going to be a head coach, why not coach a team that has Chris Jones, if not for Aaron Jones, probably would be, or not for Aaron Donald, probably would be the best defensive tackle in football. And I get to have Patrick Mahomes to hook my wings to. Take me away, Patrick, right? They don't get Spags. So who else is out there? Okay, you don't get Stafford. You don't get Rodgers. We'll call Tom Brady. We'll call the final trick in the book, the final bunny in the hat. We'll call our Tom Brady. They called the Jets on Jeff Ulbrich. They said, hey, you run our scheme to perfection. We want you in San Francisco. Uncle Sam, Uncle Shanahan wants you to represent the San Francisco 49ers. Hometown guy, San Jose State, played in San Francisco, was hoisting Bryant Young on his shoulders in the insane photo they have of him. Come back to SF. Jets say, are you serious? No freaking way, man. We're not letting our defensive coordinator go to go be yours across the country where he's probably going to fit in great. And then we're going to see her saying, now who do we hire? No staff is going to let their assistants go for the exact same job and say, well, we have nobody to replace that guy now. They swung and missed 3 different times. Now, for a variety of reasons, Belichick probably didn't want to come because of staff, not going to be an outsider in your system. You're going to run my system. Fine. Spags, I don't know. I have Mahomes. I have a good gig here in Kansas City. I'm not going to leave. Great. Ulbrich, Jets aren't going to sign off on you poaching him. What does that leave you? That leaves you with Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley. Now, again, it can work out. It can really work out. San Francisco promoted Ryans from within. Now, different experience, but promoting from within works a lot of the time. They interviewed Daniel Bullocks this year. Could have easily been him too. It felt like San Francisco, and not to mention they tried, what was it, Dave Merritt and Gerald Henderson. Merritt, the Kansas City defensive backs coach, and the Raiders safeties coach, Gerald Henderson. They tried to look at everybody that was the top dogs out there, including, now minus Mike Vrabel, but they tried to sign everybody else but Sorensen, but Staley. right? I do think for them, maybe they wanted Belichick, maybe they wanted Ulbrich, maybe they wanted Spags, they wanted the white whale, big name free agent defensive coordinator in that room. But I do think they're okay with Sorensen, and especially that they have Staley attached to him in a way. I think it makes them a little more comfortable. Now, there is this one other thing, though. The comfortability can be there. If they are successful, Sorensen's not leaving unless he gets a head coaching job, which I doubt he will get, but that's a long ways away. So we'll see. I do think that this move is not one you make that you are tied to for a long time. If you hire Bill Belichick as your DC or Spags as your DC, the odds are not only are you hitching your wagon to them and they get praised for it, mind you, but it's likely that those guys leave to be a head coach somewhere else, right? Winning or losing, Bill Belichick's probably going to be a head coach in a year. Just has to find that team. Spags. The fact that he didn't get a head coaching opportunity this year is kind of crazy, but offensive-minded league, you don't want to hire Spags, that's fine. The odds are next year, or maybe in 2 years, Spags going to leave. This move for San Francisco does provide them one of two things. They can get continuity for more than one season with Sorensen and Staley, potentially. If they're successful, the odds that both of those people leave, Staley and Sorensen leave, next offseason are very slim. One might go. It's unlikely two of them go. But here's the other thing. It also gives them a clean out if it fails. Now, sure, Shanahan will get crap for it, get criticized for it. That's the second guy. Should have never fired Wilkes. He was the scapegoat. Shanahan's the problem. Fire Kyle, right? Even if Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley don't work, you fire him again, you let him go. What team is likely going to fire their staff if they fail, when they likely fail this next season? Of the names that I mentioned as to who they wanted, Bill Belichick, not coaching this year, Spags, Kansas City's probably going to be pretty good. How about the Jets? Buffalo Bills are still really good. Should it be Kansas City this past year? The Dolphins, probably going to be good again. Bobo, albeit not who I was thinking of, same team. Robert Saleh might get fired. Ooh. Could you imagine Robert Saleh back in San Francisco? That's just one candidate of that same team. If Robert Saleh gets fired, okay, that didn't work out. Let's say it happens mid-season, Bobo. Let's say it happens mid-season. Jets are, I don't know, Jets are 4-8, not working out. You got to fire Robert Saleh. It's not working out. You're going to put Nathaniel Hackett at head coach. He loves Aaron Rodgers. Are they going to keep on that entire staff? Maybe. Maybe the interim guy becomes Bobo once again. Smart. You're so smart, Bobo. Jeff Ulbrich. Okay. That doesn't mean if they promote Jeff Ulbrich, they retain him. It simply means just like Steve Wilkes and other interim head coaches before him, your head coach gets fired, defensive guy takes over, the team gets a spark of energy, but then the team realizes, okay, Aaron Rodgers is old. How's the Achilles holding up? No promise he doesn't get hurt next year again. Hope he does. Hope Aaron gets healthy. Great player. Want to see him play. No promise it stays that way. And if Aaron's not healthy this next season, he's aging, he's older, they might say, man, our draft stock is really great. We have a top 10 pick again. We should draft a quarterback. And what do you do with young quarterbacks? You pair them with offensive-minded head coaches. What is Jeff Ulbrich and Robert Saleh not? Offensive-minded head coaches. San Francisco simultaneously set themselves up for success to get back to the scheme they want to run, like Pete Carroll, like Saleh, similar to Ryan's, under Nick Sorensen, with Brandon Staley being the Vic Fangio disciple Kyle Shanahan has always wanted in the building to watch over the practices and the defense and be the eyes in the sky. It gives you what you want, but it also gives you the chance to swing for the fences again next year. It also, think of it this way. You're a Scott Boras free agent and you sign a 3-year contract like Matt Chapman with the San Francisco Giants, and you have opt-outs every single season. Because if you play well, you opt out and you get a bigger contract the next year. That is exactly what San Francisco just did. Get back to who we once were. Find our identity again. Bring in the coaching and assistants we want, the Fangio, Pete Carroll style. If it doesn't work, though, we're going to opt out and go find our guy next year. Now, San Francisco wants to go for it. San Francisco is going to try to win the whole thing again. They know they have to win. The core is aging. The window, albeit it is still open, no one's saying it's closed, it does start to get smaller. If you're asking me, hey, Bill Belichick's not out there, no Spagnuolo. If Nick Sorensen and Staley do not work out, there are going to be 2 defensive coordinators on the open market next season because likely their team is going to stink. Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich. Both have ties to this organization. Both not only would want to coach here, fit the need of the organization. And this is getting ahead of myself, but it's exactly what just happened. They hired the guys they like, the fallback options. They swung and they missed 3 times. On Belichick, on Spags, on Ulbrich. They tried 2 other guys that were out of the building. They're fine. Comfortability is what Shanahan wants. Sorensen and Staley give him that comfortability to get back to the defense they want to run. With some flair because of the Fangio-style defense that Staley has run in the past, right? But if it fails, they have the ultimate out, knowing the Jets are probably going to stink. They're not better than the Buffalo Bills, not better than the Dolphins. With the aging quarterback, if they stink again, the Jets are likely going to want to have a young quarterback in that room, rebuild with a defense that has stars that are going to want to get paid. If the Jets stink, Ulbrich and Saleh, open market, I would not be surprised if San Francisco, like they always do, have the foresight to say, let's take a year, get comfortable. Comfortability can work. You can be really good with comfortability. In fact, maybe the less aggressive play style of Sorensen and Staley might benefit San Francisco. Maybe you don't call a 0 blitz against the Vikings and you win. Maybe going back to your system that you ran pre-Wilkes allows your edge rushers and defensive line to play more free, play better, feel more comfortable, and start to gel once again. No one's saying this isn't going to work. No one's saying this is a disaster, and why didn't you get Bill Belichick? Or I'm cool with Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley. I'm just saying San Francisco set themselves up to win this year with these 2 people, but also put themselves in a position to have an out in case it doesn't work and put themselves in a place to take 2 more big swings next offseason for 2 guys they had notoriously either had with Saleh or wanted in Jeff Ulbrich. This was a good, albeit safe move for San Francisco. Staley makes sense. Sorensen makes sense. This move just makes too much sense. It is a typical Shanahan, let's be safe. He got wild with Wilkes. This is a new guy, outside guy. But these 2 people, safe, with the chance to get crazy again next offseason. That's all I got for you today, guys. Nick Sorensen, the San Francisco 49ers' new defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley, this team's likely new assistant head coach. Do you like the move? Let me know down in the comments below. My name is Sterling Bennett, saying thank you for watching, listening. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave that review on YouTube, on the podcasting platforms. Follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. And you can also save $20 off at SeatGeek.com with your first purchase by using our promo code 49ersaccess. 49 ERSACCESS. Free money from me to you. Baseball games, football games, basketball games, concerts, any kind of game or an event you want to attend. If it's on SeatGeek, use that promo code and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. OTAs are this weekend, and my boy Isaac Rendo was lighting it up. I think he had the fastest 40 time for running backs. I love Isaac. On my Twitter account, I was like, you guys have to know who he is 2 weeks ago. I love this guy. He's awesome. There were so many amazing prospects at the Combine. I don't love the Combine. It's a bunch of guys in spandex running straight routes and bench pressing. That's all great and all. I don't care for it. But as we approach the draft, stay tuned. As we approach free agency, stay tuned. Gonna have my predictions. Gonna have my, dare I say, who I and what I think should happen and what I think shouldn't happen this offseason for San Francisco. Plenty of mock drafts to go around. Want you to stay tuned. Plenty of content coming your way this offseason. Thank you for watching and listening and liking and subscribing. And as always, until next time, stay faithful.